Alright, I've got our carburetor all cleaned up and ready to reassemble. Got the bowl all cleaned out real good. Yeah, it's looking good in there. Now all I used to clean these parts out with was just a standard spray carburetor cleaner. And now what I did to kind of scrub around on these, now I'd let them soak for a little bit, spray them with the carburetor cleaner and let that old varnish soak a little bit and then blow it out with compressed air. But sometimes if it doesn't all come out, I've got just this real fine wire brush here that I use to kind of scrub around on some of these areas to kind of help loosen that stuff up. Now the wire on this brush is real fine, so you don't have to worry about it damaging the aluminum or any of the brass components on the carburetor. And that works pretty good. Now one other thing you want to kind of inspect while you're working on this carburetor bowl is the primer pump. Now what this is designed to do, this fits on the bottom of your carburetor bowl just like that. And during extremely cold weather, if you have trouble starting it, you can depress that a few times and that gives a couple of shots of fuel straight down the neck of the carburetor to help aid in cold weather starting. Now what you want to watch out for on these is this diaphragm right here, because it can become deteriorated or just kind of melted out or whatever from the old fuel over the years and may cause you a leak. Now if that is bad, you have to buy this entire primer as an assembly. It's not real cheap, so be sure and inspect that, and as long as it's still got a good diaphragm in it, you can reuse that one. Now I normally always replace the float chamber gasket here, and I always like to replace the float valve. These old float valves, the little rubber tip on them usually gets hard and they just get to where they don't want to seal off real good. But when I was at my Honda dealer to pick those items up, they did show me this right here. Now this is pretty neat. This is made by a company called Moose. It's the utility division of Parts Unlimited. That's a motorcycle distributor that's been in business for a long time. And what this is basically an entire carburetor kit, and it's model specific for the TRX300 91 and 92. This is a 91 we're working on. But for less than what the cost of the original OEM float valve was going to cost me, which there's a float valve right there, you get the float valve, you get the float chamber gasket, all of the jets, the meter needle, and the mixture screw, and all the little O-rings and springs and everything else that you need. And this whole kit wasn't but $19.95. That was pretty cool. And that's got everything you need right there. So I'm just going to just use this, and I'm not even going to bother cleaning the jets and things out. But now if you don't have availability of this where you're at and you want to clean those jets out, now this is a tool that I've had for a long time and I recommend this. This is a Honda jet cleaner set. Now if you're interested in one of these, I'll drop a part number down in the description bar. And what this basically is, it's a set of indexed wires of different gauges that are made specifically for using in carburetor jets. As a matter of fact, they have a little guide here on the back that tells you what size wire goes in what size jets, and that way you can make sure that you're getting all the varnish out of them, but you're not going to be running a wire through there that's going to be reaming that jet out and making it the wrong size so it keeps your machine from running correctly. It's a good little tool to have right there. Alright, well I'm going to lay out my parts here out of my new carburetor kit, and then we'll start to assemble this carburetor. I've got all of our new carburetor parts laid out here, so I'm going to zoom on in here and get you a little closer shot of the carburetor body, and we'll begin to put this thing back together. Now first thing we're going to reinstall is going to be the bi-starter jet over here in the side. I've got my new bi-starter jet out of the carburetor kit here. Just put that right in the side right there. Just give that a little snugging up. Now since we're talking about brass jets and aluminum carburetors, you don't want to really over torque those things. Just a light snugging's all required. That way you don't tear up the carburetor. Alright, next thing we're going to install is going to be our main nozzle and the main jet assembly. And when we were taking our carburetor apart, if you remember, the main nozzle has an end that's a little more open and it's got an end that's a little more closed. The open end goes in first. So we're just going to drop that right down into the main jet bore. That's going to be followed by our emulsion tube. That's when it's got all those little cross-drilled holes in it. And then the main jet goes on the end of it. So we'll drop that in next. We'll run that down. Give that just a little snugging. Next one is going to be our main jet. It's going to screw right into the end of the emulsion tube. Give that just a little snugging. Alright. Now we're going to install the new low-speed jet. It goes in that bore right there beside the main jet. We'll run that down. Alright. Then we've got a little rubber plug that covers up the end of our bi-starter circuit. Just push that down in there like that. And that's going to be held in by the float bowl when you put that in place. All right. Next one is going to be our float and our float valve. And here's our float here, and I've got it cleaned up real good. Now you'll notice that these are non-adjustable. There's no metal tab or anything to bend to adjust it. So really all you need to do with one of these is just look it over real good, make sure it's not warped or out of shape, and give it a good shake and make sure you don't hear any fuel sloshing around in there. I have seen these where they'll get to leaking around the seams there a little bit and start getting fuel in there, and if so, then the float will sink and it's not going to keep your float at the right level. So we'll take our new float valve, just slide it in that little slot right there. Then you just want to ease that down into the float valve, just like that. Take your float pin, slide it right in through the middle of the float bore on the pivot. Get on in there, just like that. And what holds that float pin in place is the sides of the float bowl right there. That kind of holds that in place. All right. Next to go on is going to be our main jet baffle. It's got a little slot here that lines up with that tab. You just put it on there just like that. All right. Next thing we're going to reinstall is the low speed mixture screw. This is the new one out of the kit. And I'm going to install this new spring on it. It's going to be followed by a little small flat washer, just like that. And then this little tiny O-ring, just like that. And we'll drop that down into the mixture screw bore. Then we're going to run that down until it lightly seats. As you remember, when we were disassembling this carburetor, we counted the rounds to closed from where it was setting, and it was 1 3/4 rounds out. So we're going to lightly seat it. We're going to back it out half, 1 1/2, 3/4. And that'll give us a good starting point, and then we'll fine tune that after we start it and warm it up, get it running right. All right. Next I'm going to install the float chamber cover, and as you can see here, I've got the O-ring installed, and I've also reinstalled the original primer pump there. And we just need to reinstall the screws. All right, that's got the bottom side of the carburetor done. So now all we got to do is reassemble the top side. Now on our slide, what I did to clean that off is I just took a little carburetor cleaner and sprayed some on a rag and just kind of wiped all the varnish off the outside of this slide area right here. That way I wouldn't get anything on the rubber diaphragm. Now the metering needle here, normally I'd take that off and clean that up, but since the kit's got a new one in it, we're just going to replace it. So to get that one out of there, you go through the top of the carburetor slide with a Phillips screwdriver. There's a little holder in there. You just give it a 1/4 turn, remove the holder. Come on out of there, holder. There we go. That's what holds the metering needle in place. So we'll set that aside. Then you got your metering needle. It comes out. And there's also a little washer right there that comes out with it. So be sure that you get it and the washer. Now, these metering needles are adjustable. And what you got here is what you got here is a little E-clip on the end of that metering needle there. And there's several slots there. There's actually 5 slots that E-clip can go in. Now on this particular one, the E-clip was in the middle slot. So that's the same thing we want to do with our new one. We want to put that E-clip in the middle slot, and then we'll reinstall it. All right, there's our new metering needle. We got the E-clip in the middle slot, so we're ready to reinstall it. So we'll take our metering needle, install the shim washer on it, then we'll start it back down into the slide. Make sure it comes out the bottom, Then take your holder, drop it in place, Phillips screwdriver. Just kind of work it around until it settles down, then just give it a quarter turn to lock it. And it's spring loaded, so it holds that meter and needle all the way down at the bottom, and now we're ready to reinstall it in the carburetor. So we'll take our carburetor here, and this slide has a particular direction it needs to go. If you'll notice on the diaphragm, there's a little rubber tab right here. Then on the top of the body of the carburetor, there's a little keyed slot there for it. So we'll take our slide, drop it down there, and make sure that the needle goes into the main bore of the main jet there. Then just line up the notch on the carburetor with the tab on the diaphragm. Next to go on is going to be the spring. Drop that down in there. And then you've got your cover. And if you notice on the cover, there's also a little vacuum slot right there that needs to line up with that tab on the diaphragm. So just be sure to get your spring engaged into the little holder in the top of the cover there. Then spin that around until it lines up, just like that. Then just reinstall the screws. All right, that's got our carburetor fully reassembled. Now we're ready to put it back on the machine.